All right. Sarah, am I coming through loud and clear?
Yep, you're all good.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Well, welcome everybody. I appreciate everyone attending, and I'm sure audience will build over the coming minutes, but we're going to go ahead and get started, cognizant of everyone's calendar. Welcome to the GovPath June webinar series, where we're going to talk about common challenges within the permitting and IT landscape that some of our esteemed guests are facing. And before I introduce those esteemed guests, I do want to just do a little admin logistics. Everyone is muted for the purpose of organization of the call, with the exception of the speakers. However, a few folks on this call are looking constantly at the chat. And if you have questions based off the topics that we're discussing, please type your question in the chat. And what we commit to do is we'll either answer it live if there's enough time within this segment, or we will recap those questions and we'll meet with our guests offline to make sure their answers are appropriately represented. And then we'll send out the answers to those questions. So I do want to thank our two guests for attending today and certainly giving up their time on the prep side as well as this live Q&A. And then for that, let's go ahead and get started. So I want to introduce our two guests, myself, and then let them have some time to introduce their perspective and their background before we get into the questions. Okay, so let's start with Michelle. Michelle NewRingeisen from City of Oakland. You're in the strategy and business operations side with the City of Oakland. And I think briefly I want to describe my vision of how we met. GovPath's been working with the City of Oakland for years from a support perspective and ongoing maintenance. And we were starting a vision cast about bigger picture assistance and optimization. And then Michelle, I think, inserted herself in the procurement path and the decision path to make sure that the nature of the discussions were pursuing along the same line of thinking that strategic leaders at the City of Oakland wanted to hear as well. So, Michelle, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself and your background.
All right. Inserted myself. That sounds aggressive, but probably maybe accurate. I don't know. Thank you, Brian and Sarah, and great to be here with Cory as well and have a chance to meet and learn from him. My name is Michelle NewRingeisen. I'm the strategy and business operations lead for the City of Oakland IT. And for those who are familiar with the East Coast or maybe live out there, formerly from Fairfax County, spent 14 years there, and that is a large county in Northern Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C. Here in Oakland, I've been here for about 4 years. I oversee a large variety of functions that range from IT program and project management teams to finance and contracting, which is where I first connected with Brian, as well as all citywide printing and print shops. However, a majority of my time is spent on enterprise systems. And my team works on enterprise permitting, which is our Acela system, and also citywide GIS, and we use an Esri system for that. So I would say overall, our goals are to kind of work collaboratively with our partners and departments across the city to increase functionality in systems so that we streamline and make efficient how our users are experiencing the system both in and outside of the city. We've made a big effort to centralize our IT functions, our enterprise teams into IT so we can operate sort of more efficiently at a global scale. We lead permitting strategy and coordinate across the departments on that. We're very focused on governance, prioritization overall, and then system-wide planning.
Fantastic. How about peacefully manage the situation? That's probably a better adjective of how we first met Michelle. And then I also want to introduce Cory Hodges, assistant to the city manager at City of San Bernardino. San Bernardino's actually in the middle of a project, but both Oakland and San Bernardino are constantly in the middle of projects, but they're in the middle of an implementation. Some departments are live, some departments are not. And Cory and I met each other way back in the official procurement stage of this project, which would have been throughout 2024.
Yep.
So Cory, over to you.
Wonderful. Well, I'm Cory Hodges. I'm the assistant to the city manager for the City of San Bernardino. And a lot of my role here is assisting the city manager in a lot of the special projects and strategic initiatives that the city has. One of the big ones was we received about $80 million in ARPA funding. And the city manager at the time said that it was appropriate that we upgrade our legacy software systems. And so he asked me to join with him and partner with the departments to achieve that goal. And he decided that we would upgrade both our ERP system and our LMS system at the same time. And so that's been a really fun challenge. And so I've been partnering with the directors on both sides of the project just to make sure everything is running smoothly and they have good coordination and alignment between leadership, the consultants, staff, change management folks. And one of the interesting things is that we're coming off of legacy systems that involve paper processing in many places, Excel in many places. And so it's been challenging and also rewarding to kind of get everybody on one system at the same time. And the ERP system specifically has been interesting because we're replacing payroll, finance, budgeting, and then on the LMS side, we're replacing all of our land management systems. So we've got projects on both sides, and it's been great working with Brian to try to get them going. And we're coming to the business end of the project. We started in 2024, so it's been really rewarding. So thanks for having me.
Fantastic, and thank you for being here. And my name's Brian Weber. For those I haven't met, I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of GovPath. We're excited about this webinar series. This is the third since we started 2026, with the next one coming in August. And we're just happy to be the medium and the format to echo and represent and spotlight some challenges that our jurisdictions are having across the United States. GovPath supports nearly 300 jurisdictions in state and local in 41 states across multiple permitting and licensing platforms. Yet there always seems to be common challenges. The version of the movie may be slightly different, but we hear a lot of the same narrative as we move from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So hopefully the audience and the listeners can pick up 2 or 3 things from this webinar that are aha moments that can help you navigate the internal and external leaders that you help serve and support. All right, well, let's jump into a few questions for this audience. So I know Cory, Michelle, you both started to talk about what you're trying to solve right now, and I want to add an urgency lens to that. So all of the problems you're facing and what you're trying to solve right now, what problems feel most urgent to solve, and how are you navigating that? And so, Cory, let's start with you on that answer.
Well, I think probably the most urgent that we're trying to solve is efficiency between the departments. So like I had mentioned, the different departments are using different systems. The workflows often don't integrate well with each other. And so we're losing some staff time on some of the bigger strategic projects that the city is trying to move forward. So what we really want to solve for is how can the different departments work together quicker and more efficiently? Like I'd mentioned, some of them are using Excel to track things, some of them are using Word. And so we'd love to get them all on the same platform so they can quickly move projects through and deliver for the residents. On a bigger scale, the city would like to attract more businesses, more development projects, and we hear from the community a lot that, permit processing is slow, development process is slow. We don't always get answers as quickly as we need to. And so moving to this new software, we're hoping that we can free up some of the staff time to really address that. And then on the internal side, because we have some of these outdated systems, like I mentioned, I fill out a timesheet on a paper still. And so that takes some time away from me, from the approvers. And so if we can get on a system where everything is more efficient, we'll have more staff time to work on some of the bigger ticket items and some of the more efficient items that we need to. So internally, it's efficiency, but externally, it's really trying to deliver for the customers faster and be more attractive for some of the development. We've got a lot of surplus land, and if we can move through the permitting and entitlement system and the licensing system quicker, we can get those projects going, and then we can get the revenue from them.
Makes a lot of sense, and I know your implementation's enterprise wide, or as enterprise wide it can be. So that's not just one department going into a new system. That's all of your departments. So can understand the prioritization matrix that probably needs to be put in place to navigate that. Michelle, how about yourself?
I appreciate, Cory, the way you outlined your challenges, internal and external, and that's actually how we think of it as well. And I would say for us right now, same thing, balancing the needs between implementing new modules on the external side, so scoping. We're implementing scoping on the permitting side, as well as electronic plan review. So making these changes that impact how external users interact with our system, but balancing that against the needs to run and operate an efficient system internally. And those are two very different things, is what we've found out. When we centralized our systems administrations team in IT for permitting for Acela, you talked with all of the departments. We went out and said, we want a list of all of your projects that are in flight, those that are in your queue. What are you thinking about? And we were really overwhelmed by the amount of individual projects that departments had on this list. And so it's been a tremendous amount of work to address individual department needs as we transition to this larger sort of governance-oriented decision-making model of citywide prioritization. So we don't want to leave all the department needs behind, but we do, are making strides, really great strides to move towards a centralized decision-making model. So balancing the two needs when you have limited resources, limited staff, limited time it's been a huge challenge for us. And so I think we face the most urgency there is figuring out how to deliver on promises for external improvements while focused on being true and meeting the needs that the departments have presented for their own permits and permitting system.
Thank you, Michelle. And from my own observation as an outside partner looking into the city of Oakland, on a few occasions, you have departments reaching out directly kind of with their own request. And I've watched you, for their own benefit, try to allow them to work through you and your team, not because of, from my observation, trying to control the situation. You're actually trying to help the situation so that it get the support and the prioritization of your entire group. And also, I'm sure, so that there's a level of standardization across what the entire city is trying to do from a vision perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also really hard when you have departments who have been operating these systems and making choices independently for so many years to then try and create one large enterprise system and move to a shared decision-making model. It's a really big change management shift for everyone.
That's a great setup for our next question. And let's really talk about how we actually bring these people together, or how you actually bring these people together. So Michelle, we can start with you. When we think of Oakland, San Bernardino, functionally speaking, IT is in a different place from an organization, from a centralization, decentralization perspective, but you're really trying to solve a lot of the same common things. And one of those is alignment across departments. So how did you get started getting departments all moving in the same direction, this like herding cat phenomenon, and what worked, but also what was harder than you initially anticipated?
So it's a good question. If I sort of pull back to our overall strategy as a city, I started about 4 years ago concurrently with our CIO. And one of the things that we observed was that there wasn't really a governance model, a technology governance model in place for the whole city. And so our approach was to kind of move this through our tech purchasing process. We looked at our administrative instructions, our city policies for technology purchasing, and we started there with implementing kind of structure, we call it governance, on ensuring that there's review and discussion before departments implement new technology. So whether that's cybersecurity, understanding how they expect or want those systems to integrate with current enterprise systems in Oakland, or just are we duplicating this effort? Is there something else already working in the city that could meet this need? So as part of that sort of overall governance strategy, we also wrote into the policy the ability to set up committees to oversee enterprise systems. And we did that right away with Acela. That's our first governance committee. So we put in place is to really elevate permitting across all departments to the director level and engage all of our directors kind of equally in understanding how the system works. So creating that alignment sort of at the top level while continuing to work with our SMEs, our subject matter experts on their projects and programs. So really trying to capitalize on coalescing this group together so that we could start to have overarching discussions on system strategy, what we want, understand from our city leadership what they're hearing from the public and business and residents on what they want to see in the system, and then collectively start to make decisions on how we're moving forward and what we're going to prioritize and what we're going to do when. So like I said, that sort of helped push departments to stop thinking about things only from a department perspective, what's going on with their permit and their time frame, to how it fits in larger kind of citywide. So, so I think for us, creating that visibility and then also honestly centralizing the contracts together under one umbrella was a huge move for us as well, because that enabled us to not control what was going on across the city, but actually make things easier, because once we had a prioritization, once we had a queue, people understood where they were in the queue and they're ready to go when it's their project, when it's something comes up, or when we're working on a citywide implementation, everyone's now much closer to being on the same page and ready to go with each of their sections. So for us, that was another big way to bring people together.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Contracts, it's one of my favorite topics, but it's a topic for a whole other webinar. Cory, from your perspective, how did you engage and bring people together? I know you took one or two tactics that were maybe slightly different, but reached the same results as Oakland.
Yeah, when we decided to use some ARPA funding, there was a long list of projects at that time, and obviously an obligation deadline looming. And so I already knew that different departments would be spread pretty thin, and that they wouldn't necessarily be so focused on this end result thing 2 years out from when we started in 2024. And so to try to focus their attention, what I thought would be a good idea was I asked all the department directors to join me and bring a subject matter expert, or their go-to person on the primary technology in their department. I said, join me. We're going to go on some site visits to local cities, and we're going to have some roundtables specifically around land management system, or ERP. We wanted to know, why did you choose a certain software? What were some of the challenges? What were some of the unknown unknowns? And I think that initial experience kind of brought them into this entire implementation pre-procurement process. And so we could use all of that information, that feedback, specifically from the departments and the other cities, to build into our scope of work, our feature functions. Folks were hearing things that they didn't know they might need. And that really builds some consensus and some buy-in early on. And it really helped us because, I think looking back at it, that scope of work that we developed and that feature functions list ended up being the primary driver for what we got out of the software on the other side. Some of the things that we left out are now coming to fruition, like, oh, we really needed that. We didn't build that in, so we need to do a change order. But for the departments, they got an early taste on, this is a strategic goal of council. We do need to devote some resources. It's an important project for the city manager, and so plan that into your work days. And so as we went through the procurement process, I also brought them into the RFP evaluations, the vendor interviews, the scoring, the actual selection. And so it wasn't a surprise, and they did feel like they had some input into the software and the implementation consultants that we ended up choosing. And so I think all of that really helped, because they didn't feel like the change was happening without their input. And I think it was positive. Obviously, there's some things that we missed integrating into the contracts and the scope, but a lot of it we did get right. So I think that was really helpful in bringing them together. And then even now having a governance structure where we kind of meet with the consultants and then offline, we can discuss different issues and try to drive towards a solution. I think that helps instead of kind of doing that in a vacuum.
Yeah, that's great advice. For those that missed the opening of Cory's answer, he leveraged the City of San Bernardino leveraged ARPA funding, which is always great when there's an additional option to be able to leverage for a city and or county's needs. It reminded me of when CARES funding was available just after the pandemic. And most recently, I'm sure everyone is aware of this on the call, the HUD announced about a week ago up to $3 million in 6 grants that is eligible to be used towards the modernization of permitting and licensing systems. Your GovPath personnel have links to that if you're not aware of that, but there's a series of hoops to jump through from an application perspective, but yet again, another venue to be able to drive change within your local jurisdiction. And speaking of change, so Michelle, what's starting to change, right? Even though you're still at work and some of this is continuous improvement, I don't know if you'll ever not be at work at these improvements, but what if you can share a couple of the success stories that you're seeing from a change perspective, that would be great.
Sure. And I think this is actually a great question for a couple of reasons, but primarily we're all feel like we're working multiple jobs and we're spread thin. We just keep going and going, right? Because the goal is to deliver. Everyone's very high functioning in their teams trying to deliver. Usually we stop and take stock of things and think about change management or where things need to change. But I think it's really important to also take that pause and celebrate the wins and the things that are going really well. So even just hearing some of the things, Cory, that you were talking about, I mean, these are huge successes. So it's really nice to make sure that we talk about them and then also let our teams know, because they might not even realize they're busy working on the next thing, to just appreciate and understand, all the good work that's being done. So we are seeing, I think, some change. It's slow and it's steady. We have stronger relationships across the subject matter experts, across all of our departments. I think we're also very tangibly seeing better sets of business requirements. So when we start a new module or implement something new and require business requirements, workflow diagrams from departments, the initial quality of work is much higher and much more comprehensive. We're also seeing very thoughtful testing being done. And I have to be very clear, it's the business analysts in the city haven't changed their practices dramatically. I mean, these are all incredibly talented, intelligent, hardworking people. We're very lucky in Oakland to have the teams across the departments that we do have. I think what the difference for us has been, these subject matter experts, these SMEs now have access to context that they didn't have before, context about how their permits or their work touches other departments, how that workflow leaves their agency, hits another one and comes back to them that they didn't necessarily have before. So, and we all know the better the requirements and the testing go, the fewer problems there are in go live once we move to production. So we've now had several examples of things that we've moved out to production that have gone really smoothly. So we're really pleased about that. We do think that increased interaction and knowledge has helped. We've also seen just better relationships across the departments too, as we've moved through this process of trying to centralize. We do see better, stronger communication, collaboration across the departments now that they understand their piece connects to everyone else's piece as well. So for us, I think those have been 2 big changes that we celebrate on our end.
I love that word, celebrate. We in all of the jurisdictions we support, Michelle, we see both decentralized and centralized models, some of which are driven by ordinance and or org chart structure. But when you're in a centralized model, you really can start to take on the life of a service delivery organization to some degree. servicing your internal customers, and I've seen that play out in certain jurisdictions across the United States. In fact, I was in a very large jurisdiction in a Rocky Mountain state that's the exact acronym they used in the conversation. Was they really want to take on the persona of a service delivery mini org within an org, if you will. And so, Cory, when you think of change at San Bernardino and improvements, what are you starting to see?
We're starting to see some faster business license turnover times. That's the first department that's gone live. But to Michelle's point, the communication and coordination between departments is just accelerated. I think a lot of it is because this process is kind of forced departments to say, what is our process? You know, we've been doing something for a certain way since I've been working here 10, 15 years. I never really questioned it. I never really thought about how it impacted other departments that have a piece of my work. And so it's been a change in how the different departments that are going through the land management system implementation are seeing how their work is impacting other departments and how they can be more efficient. I think staff are revisiting some processes that have been in place with legacy systems in a way that they wouldn't have before. And I think they're being inquisitive and thinking, hey, I noticed if I ask for this feature function, how is that going to impact planning or building when they get this document? I'd really like to see this feature so they don't have to call down every 10 minutes to ask for a business license number. They'll be able to see it. So I think staff are kind of being way more proactive because they understand that they're not going to be working in a siloed system. They're going to be working in a system that everybody has access to. And so they can think in that way. And that's been great. I think on the external side, and we may touch on this later, but the community is starting to change a little bit about how they're interacting with business license because we're moving from primarily a paper-based business license or permitting process to an electronic version. And so it's been a community culture shift in the way that they're interacting with some of our external service departments.
Yeah, I appreciate that transparency. You've both said the keyword governance, and in our travels across the United States, those that have almost a change management champion internally can really navigate this continuous improvement via governance model, I think, more effectively, because change is hard. It's not easy. Is it necessary? I would argue yes. Especially if listeners out there can say, I don't know if we've really evolved our business processes since original go live. And in some cases that was 3, 5, 7, 10 years ago. Although I know your way of doing business and serving your constituents certainly has evolved. And so we can help there, or these sort of conversations can help shed some light as well. But it doesn't mean that certain areas weren't hard. And so, Cory, let's start with you at San Bernardino. What's been harder than expected?
Finding the resources and staff time while also delivering for the day-to-day constituents and residents. I think that been a little bit harder than we anticipated. Obviously, when you build a schedule, you think, okay, everything's going to go exactly to this plan. We won't have any changes. The staff will have plenty of time to work on both things. And it's just been a little bit harder to create the time, really. Another thing is because our community, like I'd mentioned, has been so used to a certain format of interacting with some of these service departments, business license and permitting, kind of changing their view on how they will interact has been a little bit more difficult than I anticipated. But I think it's needed, but it's also something that we need to work on. Folks are used to being able to interact with a person over the phone or in a paper application, and now they're dealing with a software system, and that's something that we really need to work on to make sure that they kind of get that transition down. So that's been a little bit more difficult. Data migration, it's easy to think, hey, let's map out the fields, everything will come over super easy. That's been a little bit more challenging because you may have some legacy systems and fields that don't translate perfectly. And then, once you go live, there's just unknown things that pop up. So I would say that it's a combination of things. The staff has been fantastic in everything, dealing with all of the issues that have popped up. But there are some things that are just a little bit harder than expected. And I think if I could go back a couple of years, I would have included maybe a little bit more time for staff, maybe a little bit more resources than expected, maybe a little bit longer of a timeline, and then some other things to really hit on some of the things that we might have thought would be a little bit smoother, like how would we deal with 50% of customers still wanting to come in and process things in person, so.
Yeah, that's fair. Still in the middle of an implementation, yet few departments being live or about to go live. There's this phenomenon that always happens upon go live, which is users, no matter how invested in system testing or UAT they are, they go, oh, this is how it works in production.
Yes.
And I also want A, B, and C and X, Y, Z in the system. And there's just no getting around that. We see that no matter how small or how large an implementation is, that a parking lot of, call it enhancements, call it feature requests, starts to organically develop. And in our world, we call that a second phase, that when it's right for the city to take a look at prioritization of that and so forth. Michelle, when I hear Oakland and the shift from decentralized to centralized decision making, that's not like installing an iPhone app. So what's been harder than expected when making a shift, a culture shift and a programmatic shift like that?
I think just the amount of time that it has taken. And it's not because people weren't willing participants, it's that you have these systems and these processes that are historically entrenched in how work is done, how systems operate, how decisions are made. So I think my understanding of the amount of time that this would take to really move to a high functioning model of a centralized system with a systems admin team, I underestimated the amount of time that would take, and it's still an ongoing process that we're working through, and it requires a lot of time and effort to meet individually with departments, with constituents on programs, and in order to keep that shift going. So I echo the time and the staff time constraints. We constantly, now more than ever, juggle with departments the need to advance system-wide goals and objectives and implementations with their own needs to upkeep the system, meet their own customer demands. And so we work really hard now to split. You talked, Brian, a little bit about a systems team providing customer service, right? So we are the customer service team for all of our departments as well. So trying to kind of split negotiate how we strategize, how we manage our time in order to get to all the tickets that our staff are putting in, or constituents are putting in service tickets on how to use the system and changes that they want done versus globally, kind of what needs to be done in the system. I think also we, as a system, continue to add new priorities. And I love a checklist, and I want to be able to check it off and feel like we've accomplished something. But the reality is needs change. We get new legislative deadlines, statutory requirements that come to us. We continue our annual processes like master fee schedule and things where we need to go in and reprogram and script the system. And all of that work continues. And then on top of that, we need to service and prioritize what we're doing. So understanding how to split time and how to help staff and our departments manage that and manage expectations, I think has been difficult. So managing priorities across departments, who comes first, what happens first, what gets done in the system, obviously managing budget and what we're able to do, the realities of what we're able to do in any given year is really dependent on budget. So we're pretty mindful of that. And I think the last two things that I'll say are differences in the way departments use the system. And that's been a little bit unexpected for us because we have departments that have processes that they value those processes on paper because it allows them to interact a certain way with their constituents and their businesses. So trying to figure out how to kind of honor that process while moving things forward as a system has been a challenge, and it's been really actually very interesting to understand why and how departments set up things the way they had originally in order to meet the needs of their constituents. So that's been a difference I didn't expect. And I think the last thing I'll mention is that, we know the leaders in our city, just like anywhere, public, private, corporation, like they're ultimately accountable to the residents and businesses that use the permitting system. And so, we get that. We try very hard to give them accurate, reliable, timely information about the system and meet their needs. But we all know how complex permitting is. So on many occasions, we have leadership in the city who would like to know, when will this be implemented? And we would love to say with certainty, September 1st. But the reality is, we feel like many times we can't give them that clear-cut answer. It could be, yes, this will be implemented, it will go live on September 1st, but there are these 4 ancillary components over here that we didn't really realize how connected they were. Those are going to take till December to fix or to implement, to go through a new process. And so I think for us to really continue to struggle to find a way to be just very clear in our expectations and with information that we share with our leadership, because we know they're the external facing agencies that are going out to small businesses, having these discussions in the community and trying to be clear with them. So that piece has also been a challenge, just given how complex permitting is.
Yeah, that is being sensitive to budget and how complex permitting is universal, whether you're a 500,000 population city or a 50,000 population city. And I love the visual of, you mentioned you're a checklist, checkbox oriented person. I find myself when I'm doing a to-do list, I'll add things on there that I know I just finished, just because it feels so good to cross that off and do the checkbox. I'm one of those personality types, but it just feels like a small win to get through the day. And again, we have about 2 questions left. So if there are any other questions that listeners out there find are very, they resonate to what you're experiencing at your jurisdiction, throw it in the chat and we will get to it one way or the other. So when it comes to prioritization, we at GovPath, Michelle and Cory, fight this all the time in a supportive manner with our sidekick, our managed services offering, which we have an urgent ticket designation. And an urgent ticket designation for break fixes comes with dimensions that the other classifications don't, such as an emergency hot fix, overnight or after hours release, and a very tight turnaround SLA around response and resolution. But we live by the mantra, and I'm sure you do too, that if everything is urgent, then nothing is urgent. So when it comes to prioritization, Michelle, we'll start with you. What do you do when everything is urgent? How do you approach prioritization within the permitting and licensing landscape?
Yeah, I'm laughing because I feel like we possibly used some of your overnight services when we've broken things.
You actually have.
This feels familiar. Yeah. It's a good question. I've talked about governance a lot. So that's our number one way of trying to kind of assess a tier to what we consider urgent as a city, right? So globally, what are our priorities? How are we going to implement this? What are we going to budget for? So that's one tool, and I won't talk much more about that simply because I have already. But I would say that's our number one overarching tool. The second thing is we understand, sort of as a system, as we're moving towards more centralization, that we have an obligation and a need to implement things that make a difference in how our users, our external users, interact with the system. But the reality is, as we centralize, we start implementing things like scoping or electronic plan review as a team, as a city team. We also have a tremendous amount of inefficiency within our system. So processes that don't quite connect, workflows that end with a department because they never had to connect directly to another department before. It was an email saying, hey, this workflow is ready for you. So there's a lot missing in the system that automatically sort of triggers or moves things around appropriately. And so it's been a struggle to help everyone understand that the internal system, that back end of the system, is really just as important as the front end of the system. For us to kind of address this, we went ahead with our partners at GovPath and did a business process review. So we had a BPR, which meant we had an external team come in, somebody who knew our system well enough, but could provide an independent look kind of under the hood at what was going on in the system, meet with all of the SMEs, meet with all of the department heads, start to take track of what people's priorities were, where they felt like the functionality was a little bit rough, as well as observations that we had the GovPath team make independently about our system. And we were blown away when that report came back, Brian. I think there were like 60 or 70 recommendations of things that we could do to improve our system on the back end. So, for us, knowing that we also considered the system and how we use it, how we script, and how functional it is in the back end was urgent to us. We worked through governance to reserve funding for remediation efforts with this business process review. So we knew going in, we're going to have the review done, and there was going to be funding available for remediation. So since that report has come out, we've done sort of the tiering or the buckets to us. What is most urgent? What is low hanging fruit, level of effort low, versus things that are going to be complex and take some time to finish. We've moved that and sort of funneled that all through governance to have sort of buy-in and understanding and starting to work with the departments individually. And because we have these projects kind of queued up and ready to go based on level of effort and importance to departments, we're able to see when departments have a lull. If they finished requirements on scoping, for example, they have a lull. So we're ready to plug in one of those internal projects through our BPR, and some of them we do on our own. Our team does. Some of them we rely on our partners at GovPath to do. But for us, that's how we've managed the sort of the urgency with the internal system or the back end of the system, and negotiated that divide between how do we provide a great externally facing system while still maintaining our internal and strengthening our internal system.
I appreciate that color, and thank you for the business process review, certain commentary. One of the best things that I've seen you, Michelle from Oakland, leverage with the business process review report output is it's not contained to a single fiscal year. You can take this report and really spread it across multiple fiscal years to be able to use that prioritization matrix of quick win versus, this is a 24-month effort, may require more resources, et cetera, but you can take with you into fiscal planning and into governance. And we could do a whole webinar on business process review, which we did. And those that are interested can certainly get a link to that with Miss Abby Schultz from Avondale, Arizona, that we did in February of this year. Okay, Cory, so in San Bernardino, obviously Oakland is at a different place in the movie than San Bernardino from a electronic permitting and licensing system. With you, it sounds like your challenge is very different. You're in the middle of building something, right? While trying to keep everything moving at once. So how do you manage that natural conflict of what gets attention?
Like you mentioned, sometimes everything is urgent. So I try to work with the team to discern what's urgent and what's critical. And what I would define as critical is anything that would impact our overall timeline, our budget, or the constituents, and then staff's time. If there is a bug that they're dealing with that they think would take a significant part of their day from their day-to-day business, And I think that's pretty critical. If it's something that will impact a large number of customers using the system, that's critical to me. And if it's going to impact our overall timeline of, rolling out our go live of all of the modules, that's super critical to me. And I normally bring that to attention of our internal project governance team, and we all try to get some quick solutions. What do you think from IT? How urgent or critical do you think this item is? Same thing with the community development director, from the finance director. We all kind of brainstorm and decide, we only have a finite amount of resources with staff time and with you folks at GovPath. And so how do we decide where to prioritize your attention? And we usually get to the place where we decide, if it's an ample amount of staff time, if we think this is going to impact thousands of customers because of a bug or an error, or if this will take us off of our schedule and impact our budget because we only have a finite amount of resources. And that all, I know this is limited to land management, but it also is for our ERP system implementation that we're standing up. We're not live in any of those, but we're dealing with those same issues of which of these modules do we need to ensure stays on time and on schedule. And so for me, it's what's urgent, because everything in the implementation at this point is urgent. We want the system up and running and perfect in a perfect world. But those critical items, if we can triage them, that's going to have the most effect. If something specifically in business license is impacting some of our inspectors' ability to issue citations or our ability to collect revenues and book them in our accounting system, those are super critical items that we need to huddle as a team and address right away. So that's how I try to navigate things and present some of those issues for our project governance team. And we try to take care of them as soon as possible and then work with you folks on a path to a solution.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. Well, there's 2 or 3 words of the English language that I dread, one of which is perfect. You said perfect earlier on, and when you're the vendor, it's almost impossible to scope perfect.
Yeah.
But what I think San Bernardino and others have done a great job with is managing that 80-20, 90-10 rule around really focusing on what matters and what will create the most impact. As a vendor, GovPath tries to do a bit of a challenging the status quo relationship with our jurisdictions, where we'll ask, okay, is this request or this enhancement, is this something that it changes your user's life on a monthly basis or on a daily basis? And then we have to evaluate the amount of customization that's going to go into the solution based off something that is going to change their lives monthly or daily. And it's something to truly think about, because there is an element of over-engineering any system. And we are compelled as system integrators and professional services experts to drive sustainability and supportability of what we're partnering with you to build, so that 5 years from now, your house is still standing and supportable. And that's our goal here. Okay, so last question, and arguably maybe the most important question if you're our audience. We're going to turn the spotlight on to them. The advice to your peers, Michelle, we'll start with you, but if you were in the audience, and maybe I know who's in the audience, I can see some names, they are about 3 years ahead before where you are. They're at the beginning of creating that governance model. They're at the beginning of moving from decentralized to centralized. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself 3 years ago or 5 years ago that's just starting this journey?
So patience, obviously, and that's been a little bit of a theme as we've moved through some of these questions, talking about our expectation on the time and delivery versus kind of reality of getting to a high quality product has always taken us a little bit longer. So I'd say that. But overall, for me personally, I moved to California and did not have the local government connections and network built that I did over working years in Northern Virginia. And so it took me a bit of time to realize, as I sat in my office and struggled with our problems in Oakland and trying to figure out how to address different issues and what our solutions might be, to really reach out and rely on peers. And it took me quite a bit of time to understand that I don't need to have a deep connection or a 10-year working relationship with somebody to just call up a different municipality or a city and say, I heard that you might be working on an issue similar. Would you spend 5 minutes with me? And not even having like a fully executed understanding of what I wanted to talk about, but just making the effort to reach out to local government peers and start a conversation, and have been really overwhelmed with how eager everyone is to talk about these issues because they're hard. And I think I realized that everybody is struggling and working through, like you've said, Brian, some variation of the same issue or problem. And so being able to connect and build that network and understand that what we're doing isn't in isolation has been pretty huge for me. So, and that's changed and shifted the way I've thought about problems in many cases. And I wish I had done that earlier. So that would be a lesson learned for me as well. I say also, I would make sure you really understand the system before you start proposing changes. And for us, as we started to look at how, I mentioned this a little bit in the last question, different departments were using the system and why the permitting system, really taking the time to dig in and understand that why piece, because that's the only way you're going to come to a successful product that's more centralized or streamlined across departments, or change workflows, is taking the time to understand how things had been set up sort of in the past and what the interconnectedness is between different modules, different instances, programs, and permits. Take time to build alignment rather than rush it. So that's the patience part. I think building governance has been a slow and steady progress for us. And looking back, just taking the time to let that develop and the relationships develop between directors at governance and the departments and the projects and understanding has been really important to us for that buy-in piece. Recognizing relationships sort of across the department and allowing them to grow and foster those relationships. And then also just understanding that this isn't a checklist. We're not going to check the box, the final box that says done and move on, that we need to be accommodating for continuing change and growth in the system, whether that's coming from the needs of our constituents, legislation, departments, I mean, from so many different areas, but just understanding that it's a work in progress and a continuation of reprioritizing and shuffling things around in order to kind of meet the needs and the demands of the system and deadlines, requirements.
That's a very candid and fair answer. I appreciate the transparency there. Patience is key, and that comes across my life and my desk several times a day. And you are right. Cory, from a San Bernardino perspective, and obviously where you were 2-3 years ago was a very different spot than where Michelle was as well. But what's your perspective and advice to peers?
I would like to echo a few things Michelle said. Other cities are so willing to provide advice and support and some experiences. So I really liked the site visit, conversation, roundtable experience. I think there were so many great things that we learned, and I think it also sparked some questions for staff that they held on to, hearing, oh, this is a situation that I heard in another city. I want to make sure that get worked into what we're doing here. And also, like she said, really understanding the processes and workflows that you have going on now and why they're in place and what's going to change about them prior to developing your scope of work and your feature functions list is huge, because you will get out of the implementation project the features and workflows that you asked for. And you can spend some of that excess time and changing all of that on the back end on really refining what you built. And I think that's really huge. The governance structure is really important. I think everybody being able to troubleshoot issues and come to solutions as a group really helps everybody feel part of the process. Another thing I would have thought about a little bit deeper back in 2024 is your organization expanding or is it contracting over the next few years? Are you getting more lean or are you adding staff? Because it will really impact your implementation process a few years down the road. We're expanding when we started the project, and now we're becoming a little more lean as we're in the meat of the project and ending the project, and that impacts staff time and things like that. And then I know if you're in Michelle or my position, it's always great to go down to the subject matter experts or the team that are involved in SIT or some of the different sessions and just sit with them, let them vent to you about things that they need or things that they're seeing that aren't working, because that type of input is extremely helpful, I think. And then just reminding everybody, hey, I know this is difficult, but this is council's vision or, your board's vision. And we need to do our best to implement this. And it's for the benefit of the community and the residents and the business owners and our strategic goals that we're trying to accomplish here. I try to bring that up as much as I can. I probably sound like a broken record, but it does help you get through some of those difficult periods and then celebrate those wins, because you're going to find out, for example, we've been very interested in Open Counter, which is, I know, an Acela project. And the main reason is the council, when they hear, oh, we're getting a new licensing and permitting system, they're probably thinking about something different than staff is thinking about. And so we need to remember that we need to deliver something that that is the council's vision, which is they want it to be easier, they want it to be more efficient, they want it to be more attractive. And so keeping that in mind for the folks like us that are working on the project is extremely important.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better. GovPath's implementing Open Counter there at San Bernardino. We're actually incorporating it into the broader project timeline so that it's streamlined with everything else that the city is focused on. I know we're about out of time. This was riveting. I really appreciate and want to thank both Cory and Michelle, as well as our entire audience. We will send this out for distribution, and just 2 updates for the group here. For GovPath, our next webinar will be in August, focused on the most wild topic of AI and what a jurisdiction, in my opinion, has done to really set themselves apart from an AI perspective. That's coming in August. And then lastly, Accelerate. For all of the Acela jurisdictions on the call, it is the first week of October. I'm sure you've already heard from your Acela sales rep around registration. GovPath is there in a very big way. We will be there the entire week. We're co-presenting with some of our jurisdictions in various classes. And the Tuesday evening, if you look at the agenda at a glance, when there is not a current event, we are going to have a social engagement. For those that may have attended the 2023 Accelerate, the last time there was one, Greg Quarter had a pretty exciting and fun and memorable to some social event one evening. And so we're looking forward to inviting our customer base to that. More to come. But again, really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you, Cory. Thank you, Michelle. And we'll see everyone soon.
Thank you.